Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. So today's video is going to be all about something I mentioned previously in my last video. For those who watched, I managed to speak about two books. Those books are 1984 by George Orwell and Tender is the Flesh by Augustina Bazterricas. Today's video is going to be a very in-depth conversation about both of these novels. Now, for those my people who have yet to decide if they want to read these books and don't want to run into any spoilers, this entire video I will be including little breaks in between my conversation so that you guys know when I'm going straight into the nitty-gritty of these novels. And for my people that are here to really get down and dirty and into it, don't worry, I'm gonna go all the way in. So without further ado, let's do this. Alright guys, so the first book we're gonna jump right into is the novel that I actually read first, which is 1984 by George Orwell. Now, if you guys know anything about George Orwell, you guys definitely know that the way he writes is very much unique and very specific to himself. So actually, before I even begin, I have a couple of notes that I want to get through that are important for people that are reading this book. So the first thing I'm going to say, and probably the biggest thing I'm going to mention to you guys this entire video, this book only has 3 chapters, and these chapters are long and gruesome. Let me tell you that. So these chapters, chapter 1 goes from 0 or 1 to 92. And then chapter 2 goes from 92 to 200. And then chapter 3 is 201 all the way to 288. Now, I'm a pretty seasoned reader, and most of the time large chapters don't really scare me, but I think, especially with this book and his style of writing, it was very daunting considering the fact that I wasn't seeing any other chapters. And I did not pick up this book, and I didn't scroll through it and check for the content page and chapter page as I would any other book. I was just I know what this book is and I want to read it. But because of the fact that I did not know if they had multiple chapters, I was reading through this book and I was truthfully flabbergasted because I was I've been reading for a hot minute and just feels like the story is pulling and pulling longer. And he is extremely descriptive. So for my people that don't really like people that are long-winded or that don't like authors that don't get quick and to the point, I'm going to be really honest, this book is not for you. I just had to get that out of the way. Getting into the contents of the actual novel, 1984 is a novel written by George Orwell, obviously, and it is a dystopian novel set in a totalitarian regime where the party, led by Big Brother, right? Big Brother exercises extreme control over every aspect of life. And that is a very broad and very obvious, what's the word? I'm forgetting. Synopsis of what the book is about. However, that book goes a little bit deeper into it, especially in today's world. Reading 1984 gives you a very big perspective on what we're currently living in. And 1984 follows a very specific main character. I'm not going to give you his name, but he is what we would call a thinker, right? There are certain things in this novel where you really cannot exercise your freedoms. You don't even have freedoms. And the totalitarian regime, it's honestly just restricting your freedom as a person, your freedom of self. Because it's restricting that sense of your humanness, it makes the rest of the setting and the rest of your characters seem very lifeless. However, the way that George Orwell writes this novel is that you're going to notice a couple of characters that are in the distance that have a little bit more color to their skin, and our main character's eyes are drawn to them. And I think that part of the novel was really cool. Once those characters were introduced, I was like, oh, a cool person that hopefully my main character will have a good relationship with. And that for sure is one of the big parts of the book that I enjoyed, was exploring some of the other characters a little bit more. And even characters that were like sheep in the totalitarian regime, they were even a little bit interesting, because as a person with individuality in real life, it feels very interesting to be reading a novel, to be reading a novel where people are truthfully just so restricted. Quick water break, I don't want my mouth to get dry. Moving on, a little bit more generalizations about the novel. When you start getting into the issue of the novel and where the troubles start to come in and where you see our plot really start to kick in, George Orwell really does take his sweet time. the way that he describes the understanding of other people, the setting, the surrounding, and just the way that our main character is just feeling, it truly does, and I'm going to be really honest, takes up 13 pages. It's very long, but sometimes I do think that that length is what makes it coming onto the ride, and it's a good ride. It's not a ride that I would hate to be on. So, cut break right here. I'm going to start getting into more specifics about the novel. So if you don't want any spoilers, skip. Alright friends, let's get really into it. So our main character, now I'm going to drop a name, Winston. Post reading this novel, I have a very different perspective of Winston that I did not have when I was reading this book. I think that Winston is truthfully a perfect embodiment of human nature. And what I mean by this is that when Winston found Julia and then they started to coerce each other, I think that the way that he went about their affair was so pure in a sense of human desire. Because when he was having his thought crimes and he was thinking freely and he wanted to say outwardly, down with Big Brother and all of these certain things, it was just the way that he described that he knew what he was doing was wrong was so intimate, and it made me think that this is truthfully what it feels like to be a human being or to be an individual in a time and in an era where being an individual will get you killed. And I would, like, obviously, and especially he talks about this in the preface, George Orwell speaks about this, that synonymousness between the Holocaust and this novel. And I just also thought about that because there are so many things in this novel that make you think about those historical moments in life. So the Holocaust, or just like, I was personally thinking some fascist regimes, but it's just so scary. And then I could only imagine what it really was like. And then one character I do want to talk about, which I'm very hurt by, and I think his development, George Orwell did amazing, was Tim O'Brien. Is it Tim? I'm not too sure if his first name is Tim, but I know it's O'Brien. O'Brien, I believe, is such a well-written character. He truthfully was the embodiment of cruelty that came in a glorified way. He saw the glimpse of rebellion in O'Brien's eyes, and I think that Orwell did an amazing job putting in O'Brien as a little scapegoat to get Winston to set up his conformity, because Winston was really trying so hard not to make himself known or not to get caught by the thought police. But he saw the glimpse in O'Brien's eyes, and that's what happened early in the story. That was his first inkling that made him want to have a taste for rebellion. And much later in the novel, post Julia, post everything, when he finally goes with Julia to O'Brien's office and joins the Brotherhood, where he's like, I want to rebel, I want to go against Big Brother, because I know there's people that want to go against Big Brother. I think that was just so beautifully done, and I think the fact that O'Brien was used as a blackmail-esque character was just so, like, I was really not perplexed, but I was so taken in that whole section of the novel, because you wanted Winston to really get out. You wanted him to succeed in his down with Big Brother. You wanted it to work. But when you realized that O'Brien was working for Big Brother in a sense of where he was, no, we have to fix you. That really did do something to me, and I was just like, wow. I was sad. He really didn't make it out, and I wanted him to make it out, but it didn't come out that way. But I do think overall the writing was amazing. I can indefinitely say that the actual storyline is so original, and I think it was masterfully done. So kudos to Orwell. However, there is a theory that I've heard in TikTok every now and then about how Orwell was a rapist. And I know that this may seem a little left field, but when we discuss Julia and her importance in the plot and the way that it was written and their actions, their Winston and Julia's intimate moments and the way that Orwell chose language to describe it, it sometimes does come off as a very predatory aspect. Sometimes it's just like the choice of words could have been better here, or this Winston had some sort of strength over Julia, and the way that their relationship was even going, it was purely off of lust, and it was purely off of that human greed. So I think that was probably the only part where I would mentally condemn Orwell, because I think that those parts of the novel where it seemed a little bit rapist-esque were not necessary. But aside from that, I definitely give this book a 10 out of 10. Or, let me be real, 8.2 out of 10. Only because I don't personally like slow books or books that are less in chapters and massive amounts of text in between. And I also just think the pace could have gone a little bit quicker, but I think that all in all, the story is amazing. Alright, you guys, so moving on, but not yet, to the next book, I want to talk a little bit more about the novel in my own interpretation and how I apply it to the real world. Now, real quick preface before I get into that information, everything that I'm saying right now is solely based off of opinion. Nothing I'm saying is 100% factual or research-driven evidence. I did not write this section, at least, down on my iPad. This is just solely off the dome. And with that being said, please don't come and start dragging me in my comments. This is just a open conversation between me and you guys, the watchers or the viewers. So with Orwell and him writing about Big Brother, sometimes it makes me, or even as I was reading the book, the novel, I was kind of going back and forth between drawing a comparison from our own government to Big Brother in this totalitarian regime. Not saying completely that we are in a totalitarian regime, because I can easily say a couple months ago the United States was in an authoritarian regime rather than a totalitarian regime, but similar in its own ways. I think it's very interesting how in the novel, the way that he was saying that people were becoming more like sheeps day by day, and how they literally had no control over their own lives, that like their status as a person and like their role is they were a part of a group, and that group completely drove what they did for the rest of their lives. And hold on guys, water break. Okay, the way that kind of drove the rest of their lives. And in today's world, and I'm young, guys. I'm almost 19. By the time this video may be up, I may actually be 19, but I'm 18 years old right now. And I think being 18 in a society, in a world like this, at this exact moment, is so telling to what I am and what my peers and what my family is controlled by. And I obviously am a consumer. Like, I am not one to say that I am exempt from any of the conformity that has occurred in today's world. But like, I want to use like AI as an example. In the novel, there was proles. There were the Ministry of Love, the Ministry of there were different ministries. I'm kind of drawing a blank right here, but there were so many different things that genuinely drove their lives. They couldn't do certain things. They couldn't think to their own. They couldn't write in their own diaries. The purchase of a diary was extremely dangerous, because the government would track your purchase, know that you're purchasing a notebook, and they would question, why are they purchasing a notebook? What purpose do they have? What are they writing? If it's not for the purpose of school, which all those books are provided, why are you acting on your own? And in terms of today's world and AI, it's very similar, and I was drawing my comparison because we as a society are falling ever more into the dependence of AI, right? We don't know what to do, so we turn to something that was curated years before, but now it's being pushed so much more by our governments, by advertisements, by like it's just straight capitalism. They're throwing AI in your face. And some people would call this like AI slop, or like you're on TikTok or Instagram, like it'll be TikTok slop. And it's just like the word slop is being thrown at you, right? And the more that you're there, the more that you're receiving it, the more that it controls part of your life. So let's say let's say like dependency, like AI dependency, and just like your own work, right? I find it freeing to write my own short stories, to write my own novels, because this is my thought. These are my ideas. I'm not searching how, like, what I should do or what I should say or what my plot line should be. Everything came from myself. But when I am thinking about like the little details, like, am I gonna admit that like I search up on Google, like if I'm writing a story and it's based in Russia, I'm obviously not Russian, so I'm like, give me native, like Russian native names to name my characters. Like that would be like the most of my internet use. But there will be people that I know, people that you know, that would ask AI a general question that's something that you could figure out on your own. And that dependence would start to gear your way of thinking. It would start to shrink it. And that is exactly what I saw or read happening in 1984. People's thoughts were being controlled. Now, in that time where Winston, our main character, was taken into that Ministry of Love with Tim O'Brien, and Tim O'Brien was reworking him, absolutely torturing him, giving him literally like worse like physical treatment, stripping him down on the bed and taping his arms to a table, like all of this physical torture just so that Tim could successfully manipulate him. Into so much so to where Winston began to believe all the things that he was being told. And we never really got, at the end of 1984, we never got like an actual answer at the end of the novel whether Winston was truthfully resocialized or not. But like, I truly believe that I am seeing and I am witnessing resocialization happening in my own communities. I feel like my mouth is getting so dry. Like, is my voice getting raspier, guys? I don't know. Alright, you guys. Now, moving on to our next novel that I read was Tender is the Flesh by Augustina Basterrica. Now, this novel I actually picked up because I saw it off of Book Talk. And this is one of those few times that Book Talk is actually very helpful. But I picked up this novel and I'm going to read you guys the synopsis because I finished this book yesterday. So all the contents of the novel is actually very fresh in my brain, but I want to read you guys the synopsis, which is right here. His wife has left him, his father is sinking into dementia, and Marcos tries not to think too hard about how he makes a living. After all, it happened so quickly. First, it was reported that an infectious virus has made all animal meat poisonous to humans. Then governments initiated the transition. Now, eating human meat, special meat, is legal. Marcos tries to stick to numbers, consignments, processing. Then one day he's given a gift, a live specimen of the finest quality. Though he's aware that any form of personal contact is forbidden on pain of death, little by little he starts to treat her like a human being, and soon he becomes tortured by what he has been lost, and what might still be saved. So, this novel, to put it quite plainly, this novel is literally just about society and how it functions when humans become the cattle. And it's also a novel about, actually, let's rephrase that. The title is called Tender is the Flesh. Tender is the Flesh is such a powerful name because we're following this main character, Marcos, right? And he's just living his life, right? He lives in the slaughterhouse type of chain. So these people that were taken, these convicts, these people that were taken and brought to the slaughterhouse, and then they're just being slaughtered, and it's like in gruesome ways. They're being absolutely slaughtered. And then you have people that are being bred in these breeding centers to become like eatable meat. Like, just honestly, for me, this novel kind of shook me up a little bit because it's not even just about the fact that humans were becoming cattle. Augustina Basterrica did an absolutely stunning job at being descriptive. And this is one of those novels where she describes the heck out of a scene, but it doesn't take her 3 million years. These chapters go by like this. And it's just Sometimes I was even surprised because there are multiple times in this novel where a chapter is literally half a page long. Like some of them are maybe 4-ish pages, and then you have a second chapter that is 4-ish pages again, and then you have a third that is a little bit longer, so probably like 9 pages. The fourth chapter is literally 1 page. And I think that that's definitely, it's surprising, but I can't hate on it because it helped me get through this so much faster. So if you like short chapters, this is for sure a book for you. But also, I just remembered this, but Agustina Basterrica, she is a Spanish literature writer. So this novel was translated from Spanish to English. So some of the language may seem a little bit distorted or confusing, and that's really just because the things might have gotten a little bit misconstrued in translation. But back to the actual content of the novel, it was so grueling to read about how meticulously they were cutting up the people. I'm going to explain this process, and this is not really a spoiler. I just think that it's something for future readers to understand. It went from a process of striking the human so that they could be cut up, but they would strike them right here, right in the dome, and they would be stunned. They would take their bodies and move them onto the processing where they would cut their skin, remove their vocal cords so they can't scream. And also they did this for the bred people that they kept alive. And they would cut them up. Every single part of their body would be used for meat processing. And something else that kind of shook me up reading this novel was that they don't refer to the people as people. These humans that are being bred like animals, they refer to them as head. Head, head. They're literally cattle. It's like you're treating a bunch of mammals like sheep. You're leading sheep to a slaughter, lamb to a slaughter. And it's so interesting. And our main character, he sometimes calls these head, he, she, they, it. He calls them so many different pronouns and titles. And as a human, and hopefully only humans are watching this video, but as humans, it's so interesting to see your own kind get treated like you're not a human. Now, cut break right here. I want to start talking about some real deep details. So if you're afraid of spoilers, skip this part. Alright guys, I have a whole lot to say about this novel. First things first, our main character, I think he is very much unwell. Off the bat. He is just so unwell. And I say this because not only did he lose his son from an early age, he is in the process of slaughtering humans. And literally psychologically, even mentally consuming any type of outrageous slaughter does something to your brain chemistry, and just constantly consuming that type of imagery really does do something to you. And I, off the bat, would only imagine that our main character, Marcos, is unwell. And throughout the novel, some of his behavior really stuck out to me because I was confused. I'm like, why is he acting like that? Why is he so rude? Why is he so angry? Why is his treatment to certain people just straight up horrible, and then other people, it glorifies them? And then he goes on to describe that he loves some of his coworkers because after his son died, they didn't coddle him. They didn't try to ask him if he was okay. They just went straight into, do you want to go grab a beer? They helped him mask his sadness. And then on top of that, with his son being dead, his wife is now withdrawn from him because she went into some sort of psychosis after losing her child. And obviously that goes without saying. I didn't even question that because I was like, that makes a whole lot of sense. But the removal of your wife, the absence of your child, and then on top of that, his parents, we don't hear much about his mother because his mother is taking care of his wife. But his father, however, is suffering from dementia as per the synopsis. So that's 3 things. You have the absence of your child, the distance from your wife, and the absence of your father. Those are 3 people in your life that you definitely have an influence off of. And being so withdrawn from all of that really does do something to you, on top of being in the slaughter industry of humans. And something else I thought was so just like speechless, like I'm literally speechless, but that took my words out of my mouth, was that our main character, I really do think that there comes a point where he loses his moral compass. And there was a part of the novel where we meet and we learn of a coworker and a friend of his that works in a butcher shop in the city. This woman is described as very kind of cold. She's very independent. She's very strong. She has a strong build. She's very she won't speak unless she needs something from you. She'll speak directly to you. Like, she's a very stern woman. And me as a reader, I'm like, oh, I like this chick. Like, she's serious. She doesn't play. But our main character has a very special relationship with this woman. And I don't know why I'm hesitating. I'm honestly just telling you guys everything. But they have an affair more than once. And it definitely struck me because I'm like, this man is in a married relationship where his wife calls him often. He calls his wife. They return calls to each other often. So I'm like, I was kind of stunned, and I would understand, obviously, because he is lacking kind of that intimacy that he would have from his wife if they lived together, but they don't. Still, that's not an excuse to cheat on your wife, but that, all in all, the first time definitely threw me for a loop. And then we learn throughout the story his other relationships with other women in the slaughter industry. We have a woman named Marie in the slaughter industry. We have another woman in the senior house that his father is housed in. And then we have the FGM. Now, this is when our main character is gifted from one of his coworkers a first generation body. She was a human that was bred, right? So into the breeding center. She's clean. She is of premium meat quality. She is absolutely amazing. She's beautiful too. And he he ships her to our main character's home. And his coworker tells him, you can do anything with this woman. Just, she belongs to you. You can slaughter her. You can keep her as a domestic animal. Just do whatever you want. This is a gift to you, my friend. And our main character first neglects her. He's like, I don't want this woman. You can take her back. And it seems as though, and throughout the story, you guys are going to realize that our main character seems kind of withdrawn from the meat packing process. He doesn't like slaughtering humans. He doesn't enjoy anything, and he consistently says that anyone who does enjoy slaughtering humans is twisted in the mind and is crazy. And with that being said, it's kind of like, I think you're in the wrong industry, friend. And also at this time where he got the FGM, he was dealing with a lot of other familial issues with his sister, with his father. But then we get to a point in the novel where he relapses thinking about his son and his wife and all that they went through trying to conceive that child. He drinks. He does a multitude of bad decisions. And he starts to yearn for solace in the only female figure that would be submissive enough to take him. And that woman is the bred cattle that is in his barn. And then, as a reader, you begin to realize that his connection with this cattle, this woman, is absolutely taboo. Everything about his relationship with her is completely punishable by death. And what makes matters worse is that he ends up impregnating the female cattle, which obviously is probably one of the most horrible things you could possibly do. And by the time that the story tells us that our main character has impregnated this woman, she is about 8 months pregnant, which makes things so much worse. Because what I'm saying right now is the tail end of the actual novel. So I want to let that be up to you guys to read on your own and to kind of formulate your own thoughts on it, because it truly did leave me speechless. But now, from here on out, I kind of want to close it up. But before I do, I want to tell you guys my real life adaptation of that book. As I read that novel, it kind of gave my heart a bit of a squeeze because I felt so horrible. And I think I felt that way because that novel really does shed light on how impressionable the human race really is. Imagine, and truthfully, imagine how it would be if at a snap of a finger, tomorrow, animals just disappear off the face of the earth and the human race is the only race that exists, but yet there are some humans that are put up for eating, to become your meal that you have every single day at dinner with your family. That a friend of yours might disappear and you have no idea whether they just died or are in actual harm, or if they're on your next plate of barbecue when you guys, like, the concept of humans being so easily tarnishable is so terrifying. Imagining the fact that we could become the hunted. It's like the hunter versus the hunted. I would never want to be hunted, but I know that the meat that I'm eating, the Wingstop that I just had, like the meat that I'm eating came from an animal. That's an animal had to die in order for me to be nourished. The idea that humans are the meat that are now suffering so that other humans can eat is so terrifying. And the way that he describes it, the way that the actual novel continues, and the description, I think Augustina really, really, really does have like an active imagery, because every single chapter when she described the new processes of slaughtering, I genuinely felt unwell. And I think that it takes a real skill to make your reader have like use your own words to allow your reader to have such an active imagination to follow what you're writing down. It really does take a skill. And in our own human race, there are already so many things happening in the world that we as a common society are blindsided to. I don't want to make this into a super political video, but there are human breeding farms. Those are usually human trafficking farms, as they are blanket termed as. There are human cannibals on this earth, and we already know of some. And that alone is so terrifying to think of. It's so daunting and emotionally contracting to even pay it any mind to. All in all, I am very moved by both of these novels. I'm so grateful that you guys have stuck with me all the way to the end, and I hope that you guys buy these books for yourself too. Until next time. Bye guys!